What makes a horror game scary? No, it's not jump scares. I am a huge fan of horror games in general, but I am so desensitized to the point where I'm literally chasing the thrill of being scared by them. Yes, horror is subjective, but you can trust me on this because my tolerance is too damn high, at least with video games. I mean, I just played a game called Silk Bulb Test, and it got nothing out of me. Don't get me wrong, it was cool as hell, but not even a twitch down there. If a horror game can legitimately freak me out, it's automatically an all-time favorite in my eyes. So I started to think, what exactly about horror games gets my adrenaline pumping? Like, what actually gets me scared? And once again, it's definitely not jump scares. Yeah, I find jump scares extremely lame. The sudden planned jump just doesn't get me anymore. I grew up in the era of stuff like this on the internet. Yes, I'll admit a good jump scare can still get me. But in all honesty, that is now down to like literally 1% of the time. And it isn't the actual jump that gets me, it's the overall execution. We'll dive into that later. Another thing, games where all you do is hide are just tedious. Oh no, the enemy's gonna get me. But I'm completely safe in here. So now it's just a waiting game.
This is boring. Delete.
But despite being desensitized, games do still get under my skin. But how? I'll strap in and I will delve into what makes me personally shit myself in a game. And by the way, if you're easily scared, viewer discretion is advised. I'm not going to be showing any jump scares. I mean, I hate them, so I wouldn't do that to you. But I am going to be showing you some creepy imagery.
So, yeah.
Regardless, to set this all up, let's look back to one of the very first horror games ever made. Haunted House. While debatably this isn't the first, it's definitely the first one people think about. And why is that? Well, it's because this has retroactively become the most basic template of what every horror game is like nowadays. It's a game of uncertainty and feeling helpless. You're a pair of eyeballs wandering around a pitch black house, avoiding creatures. And yeah, you're supposed to be a pair of eyes. The remake has confirmed this. Yes, I know, in the original it's supposed to be the cartoon representation of a person in the dark.
Why is that? It's an old cartoon convention. Eyeballs in the darkness, you know? Wow!
But I do love the joke that the remake is making here. So yeah, this is canon now. But back to the game. The goal here is to hunt down 3 randomly scattered pieces of an urn across the 24 rooms of a dark house. Along the way, you find items that help you and keys that open more doors. All in all, this sounds like the bare minimum of a horror game. And it is. I mean, think about Resident Evil, Dead Space, or even the Outlast series. They all involve this type of gameplay at its basic level. Just swap out the haunted house with the backwoods, the Ishimura, or a haunted house. Okay, fine, this is more of a mansion that doubled as a research facility, but you get the idea. So fine, we got the basics of a horror game, but what makes them scary? Well, let's look at the first big aspect, shall we? The visuals, i.e. the atmosphere and creature design. Something apparently missing from Haunted House at first glance. But if you actually sit down and read the manual, holy crap, they went all out here. The basic gist is the mansion belonged to the town pariah, a cranky old man named Zachary Graves. After he died, the mansion was condemned, but apparently a rumored treasure is hidden in the mansion itself. Neighbors claim that the lights flicker, they've seen shadows run around, and that the ghost of old Graves still roams the halls. While the game doesn't clearly reflect this with its graphics, if you actually play the game with this story in mind, your imagination can do a good job of filling in the gaps. I mean, think about it. If you were a kid in the 80s playing this in a dark room, yeah, this little story can set the spooky atmosphere of the game pretty well. Even this comically stock ghost can be spooky in the right context. But thankfully, nowadays, atmosphere can be properly implemented into a game thanks to modern day graphics. At least in some cases. Cases in point. I recently beat Silent Hill F and the indie darling Crow Country. Neither of these games terrified me, but they definitely nailed the creepy atmosphere in different ways. Silent Hill F nails it with its amazing fog effects and creature design, and Crow Country does the same, but in a classic PS1 era kind of way. This is a modern game, but designed to capture the graphic style of the early 3D era. Funny enough, it actually tries to go more for a Final Fantasy VII style look instead of one like Resident Evil, but it still works perfectly. Not so much for nostalgic reasons, but it truly feels like a forgotten game rediscovered that you never got to play. And this is also reflected in the creatures themselves. They look creepy. Even in their low poly state, they definitely look off. You don't want to be in this amusement park. Ultimately, their graphics are blocky, yet this allows players of a certain age group to relive their childhood of playing these kind of games, with something fresh. And to you younger players, this is a way to play a game that feels old, yet has modern style controls. Well, at least to an extent. It's a perfect throwback. But now, going to Silent Hill F, yeah, it can't be understated how good horror fans are eating today, thanks to modern tech. I mean, these creatures are absolutely disgusting to look at. If I ever see anything like this out of the corner of my eye in the real world, I'm gonna take off running in the other direction. They move so unnaturally, and even if they don't touch you, I feel like I'm gonna get a disease just breathing the same oxygen as them. I felt no shame in just avoiding some of these fights. And of course, the fog. Fog anywhere immediately triggers an uneasy response in our brains. Not being able to see things literally few feet or meters in front of you makes us feel helpless. Fog isn't just dangerous when you're driving. It's equally as distressing if you're walking around. But you know what? Let's remove the fog. Well-designed textures and color tone also makes things feel creepy. Buildings that look worn down and decrepit triggers another response in us. If something looks dirty, our brain tries to avoid it because it could make us sick if we touched it. Or if the structure around you looks like it may collapse at any time, yeah, that's also bad for your health. And speaking of health, let's move back to character design. Have you ever heard of the uncanny valley? This is another thing that happens in our heads. When we're looking at something that appears to be human, but we can still tell that it isn't. Such as modern day robots or animatronics. They look human, but we can tell that something is not right about them. While this is debated to be an evolutionary response, humans have developed to avoid disease or even dead bodies. It's why early CGI looks creepy to us and why certain edited images give us the heebie-jeebies. So next time you wonder why you fear zombies, it's probably because your ancestors did not want to get sick from corpses. So, to you people out there who are actually thinking about making games in the future, first things first, if you want to make scary visuals, find ways to elicit the player's real-world fears. This can vary from bodily horror through disgusting visuals, occult imagery for the religious crowd, disturbing images that set off the uncanny valley section of our brains, like the ones found in analog horror games, or just good old-fashioned shoddy architecture. Yet that does not look structurally sound. The bare minimum should be make something look creepy. Even something as happy as a clown can look creepy, so this is pretty hard to mess up. But you know what? Going back to Haunted House, outside of the cool little story, if you didn't read the manual, the game has none of the atmospheric touches I mentioned before. Instead, a lot can be said about its use of darkness. You don't know where you're going and everything is randomized. I mean, think about it. If you just woke up in a pitch black room and you have no idea where anything is, yeah, your heart rate would skyrocket. This concept is inherently scary. For example, the remakes of Silent Hill 2, Dead Space, and Resident Evil 2 are great modern day examples of how to use darkness in a game. Yes, you are given a flashlight, but this doesn't illuminate the whole room, leading you to sometimes miss stuff in the shadows, and can prompt fear even deeper than any wall of fog ever could. Not knowing where you're going or what lurks in the dark allows players to once again fill the gaps in with their imagination. And depending how messed up you are mentally, that could be some pretty dark stuff. But what if you're a normie and you literally have crap imagination? First off, my condolences. But yeah, I kinda get it. A digital dark room isn't really scary. But what if we fill it with noise?
Say that again. I couldn't hear you over the sound of me shitting myself.
Darkness is great, but only when it's accompanied with this other important aspect, sound design. Once again, let's touch on the history of games a bit. Revisiting a subject I have talked about in a previous video, audio design in a game is just as important as the graphics, and in horror, even more so. For example, the first two games to ever use speech, whether it be a synthesized voice or actual recorded dialogue, were implemented to do one thing: scare the crap out of kids at the arcade. 1980's Berserk is one of the first maze shooters, so it's your job to kill everything else, but the robotic voice that came out of the cabinet speakers, threatening the player, added tension to the overall experience.
Intruder alert, kills a humanoid.
And this is taken to the max in 1983's Sinistar, where you're tasked to avoid and destroy a giant talking spaceship with a face. Seems silly from a distance, that is until you hear the voice. Whether it's calling you a coward,
Run, coward.
or just screaming at the top of its lungs. Sinistar definitely scared the crap out of a whole generation. And it still creeps me out today. But what about nowadays? How has audio evolved to deliver the scares in the new age? Well, I got 2 words for you. 3D audio. I remember back when I first discovered the cool world of 3D audio. I played a game on my phone which was literally audio only. It was a horror game, and you literally moved in 8 directions, just trying to avoid an enemy trying to get you. I don't really remember what it's called, but this just shows that I've been interested in the audio space of horror games for a while now. There was also a running app that I use all the time, Zombies Run. This wasn't scary, but it definitely added tension to runs as you ran away from zombies trying to catch you. Either way, audio is important. Far more important than any graphics could ever be in a horror game. Like I said, painting a creepy visual atmosphere is kinda easy. Focus on things that make people feel squigged out. But sound, this is a little harder to master. The Basics 101 approach for developers is use the quiet to your advantage. If nothing is about to happen for a while, don't fill the scene with useless audio. In these moments, make the player feel like they're in a real environment. Fill it with diegetic sounds. What this means is noise that the character in-game would naturally hear. Floorboards creaking, thunder in the distance, a phone ringing, you get the idea. But when you know something is coming and you want to give goosebumps to your player, you start with a little ambience. Maybe something scratching in the distance. A low bassy hum begins to build up in the background, slowly fading in little by little. And that's when you reveal the scare. No, not like that. Alright, we gotta talk about jump scares. Audio is a great way to build tension leading into a jump scare. But after a while, jump scares just feel tedious. They begin to feel too obvious because obviously if the sound's building up, I know it's coming. And also the jump is always too painfully loud. And they're just always annoying. In general, this is why I hate jump scares. They're meant to be momentary, short-lived, and repetitive. Every other horror game does them. They aren't special. Look, I respected Five Nights at Freddy's approach way back when, since the jump scare was your penance for failing. But nowadays, games have gotten too trigger-happy with these emotional flashbangs, throwing them in whenever they want. Screw that. Build up the tension. But don't release it all at once. Let it linger and make the player want to actively run for their lives. Or in my favorite case, fight back with reckless abandonment. If I instinctively wasted all my ammo on an enemy I can barely see in the darkness, yet I know it's there because I hear it breathing down my neck, I call that a checkmate on me. Hands down, the soundscape is far more important than the visuals. Look, if I don't want to see something, I can just close my eyes. But if I don't want to hear something, I have to physically put my hands up to my ears, leaving me far more vulnerable than before. And if the sound is close enough, I can't avoid it. The vibrations can seep into my bones. So once again, developers, if you want a good horror game soundscape, focus on low noises, whether they are at a low decibel or at a low pitch. These fill the player with dread. Next, pace them out. A low drone only works if it builds up slowly. And if you want it to be loud, let it drone on. Repetition can be tedious, but it can also make the player want to rush out of an area to get relief from the sound. The Silent Hill series is legendary for this. Whether it's its loud sirens in the distance or rhythmic banging noise, both of these make you feel like an event is about to happen and you may be powerless to stop it. And make your enemies sound inhuman. Yes, it's creepy if a little girl's voice comes out of a monster's lips, but follow that up with an otherworldly screech. It's a primal animal instinct to yell out if you're feeling threatened or want to scare another being. So when you hear a loud roar or a snarl of something you've never heard before, you bet you're gonna take a step back. For example, touching on film a bit, we actually don't know what dinosaurs sound like. None of us were around to hear them. Yet, thanks to Jurassic Park, we think we do. This roar was the culmination of many different animal noises, and the idea of what a giant creature like this could have sounded like. It's not real, yet it has become very real in our minds. So, Get creative. Alright, I'm almost done talking about audio, but I want to touch on one more thing. The player's microphone. We've talked all about audio output, but what about audio input? Going back to the hiding games I mentioned in the beginning, these are again boring to me. But there is one huge exception to this. Alien isolation. If you're hiding in most games, the enemy is programmed to avoid you. But in isolation, if you make a sound in the real world, the alien will rip you out from your safety net and devour you. Granted, this isn't forced onto the player, you can always turn off this feature, but as a person who wants to be scared, I keep this on at its highest setting. Even breathing normally triggers a xenomorph, so being forced to breathe quietly in the real world is uncomfortable and makes me feel more tension. Thankfully, other games are using microphones more to interact with the game itself, not just as a thing to avoid making noise, but as a secondary controller input, such as how Phasmophobia utilizes the mic so you can say the ghost's name to get them to appear. And this is what separates horror games from horror movies, the interactivity. Which leads me to the final aspect, the gameplay. Gameplay is king in a horror game. If a game has minimal interactivity, it begins to feel more of an experience than a proper game. This works well with games like Until Dawn and the Dark Pictures Anthology, but with full-fledged games, the gameplay needs to make you, the player, feel like you're part of the horror. That means you gotta feel helpless, at least at first. I don't care how terrifying your visuals are and your sound design is. If the game character is a badass from the get-go, well then you have Doom. Don't get me wrong, I love Doom, but it ain't no horror game. It's just a badass shooter with horror elements. So, another developer's 101. How do you make the character feel helpless but not useless? Restrict their movement. Nowadays, people hate tank controls, but back then, this was a great way to make the player feel vulnerable, especially with fixed camera angles. And whenever you walked into a new room, the camera was facing away from the danger, which added to the tension of you stepping forward to reveal a new horrifying angle. Alone in the Dark may have started it, but we all know that Resident Evil perfected this type of gameplay. Over the years, this has been phased out, but thankfully, it has had a bit of a resurgence, both fixed camera angles and tank controls. Regarding the latter, I played all of Signalis with tank controls, and I had a blast. I would have with Crow Country too, but in-game they felt a little too restrictive, and the D-pad is far less comfortable than the control stick. Either way, tank controls and fixed camera angles have been mostly replaced by the third person over the shoulder and first person viewpoint, which I have no problem with, especially if they include realistic human movement, which in some cases means your character can get fatigued from running. I know, endurance bars are annoying, but we aren't Terminators. The character shouldn't be able to outrun everything. Speaking of which, developers, have enemies stalk the player. There is nothing scarier than knowing something is after you. Of course, in the beginning of the game, you gotta set everything up, but by the mid-game, in order to keep players still afraid, they have to know that something is hunting them, and at any point, they can come face to face with these beasts. Why else do you think people still clamor about Nemesis in the original Resident Evil 3? It's because this guy chased you throughout the whole game, and every encounter with him could mean instant death. You wonder why everybody loves Jill Valentine? It's because she took down this bastard by the end. She's a badass, and it's a shame that the remake couldn't replicate this. Alright, so what other ways can you make the player feel helpless besides movement? Well, we could always restrict their ability to fight back. A good example of this is Outlast. Wait, they actually wrote that? Even the biggest pacifist will throw hands if they feel like they're about to die. Moron, put down the camera and pick up the pitchfork. What's wrong with you? Oh, this has night vision? Fine, tape the camera to the end of the pitchfork and charge forward. There are legitimate ways to make your character feel defenseless without it feeling dumb. Either have them tied down and forced to play a twisted game of cards, kneecap them and make them move slowly, make the enemies they are fighting literally be impervious to average weapons, or just do the age-old tactic of restrict their ammo and supply of items. I mean, if you've seen my other videos, you should already know that survival horror is quite possibly my favorite genre of games. The ability to fight back horrifying enemies and dwindling resources forces tension into my blood no matter what. With an RPG, reloading a save feels like part of the grind. In survival horror, it feels like another opportunity to face your fears. But not every horror game needs to be a survival horror to be scary. It just needs to be within reason. If the situation is not believable, then it just comes off as ridiculous. So, we seem to have all the gameplay aspects down, right? Well, not exactly, because once again, interactivity is the name of the game. And if we look back to the interactive stories like Until Dawn, part of the thrill of a horror game is the story and how players can interact with it. I mean, Haunted House had a story, but you couldn't ultimately change anything. It was just a backdrop. So how about games that can actually change it? Well, let me introduce you to psychological horror. Typically, these games have all the aspects as mentioned before, but also include the added factor of messing with your head, which really has the power to stay with you well after the credits roll. And most of the time, this is due to the player's choices. Yes, the psychology aspect is usually attached to the story, which is linked to the lore and the overall atmosphere. But this also ties into the gameplay and your choices. Yes, some games lead you down a linear path and make you feel what it wants you to feel by asking you tough philosophical questions about life and morals. But when you play a good psychological horror game, you know which ones I'm talking about, where how you react to the questions the game forces you to face head on changes the overall outcome. Oh yeah, those are the best. Control doesn't have to just embody how you're inputting the buttons on a controller. It's also what you do in a game, how you do it, and ultimately, your decisions. Now, while this isn't intrinsically scary, these do have the capacity to fill you with dread, which is another form of fear. So while not scream your face off scary, psychological horror can fill your head with thoughts that can have you staring up at the ceiling with existential trepidation. And well, that's about it. At least everything I can think of. To be able to scare the player, a game needs good atmosphere, good sound design, and the controls need to not suck. Anything else? Well, in order for a game to really be able to scare me, it has to be able to make me forget that I'm playing a game in the first place. Because let's be realistic. At the end of the day, the game can't hurt us. It's a fake digital game. So how do horror games make us forget that? Well, if all the previously mentioned aspects are bumping, then they all culminate to encapsulate the most important aspect of a horror game: immersion. It all stems back to a big what if. What if you're in this scenario? Yes, you're clearly controlling a character on screen, but if the immersion of a game is strong enough, this fourth wall begins to blur, and you begin to not just empathize with the character, but feel like you stepped into their shoes. So if you can even for just 1 second forget that you're currently playing a game and feel like you're one with the character, congratulations, you are now vulnerable. Some games excel at this, and most recently, some games have begun to even play around with this concept, Inception style. There's now a glut of analog and ARG horror games on Steam that try to make you feel like you've broken through the fourth wall and there's no way back. Philosophically, these games are just great concepts. But even then, if you're playing a game on screen and you get too spooked, just look away from the screen. Immersion has now been broken. You're safe back in the real world. So what about games that don't even allow that ability, where you can't just simply look away from the horrors? Which brings me to the new medium, which is now my favorite way to play horror games: virtual reality. In my eyes, VR is the gold standard of horror nowadays. It's the same concept as a video game, only this time the screen is right up to your eyes, and with the headset, you have 6 degrees of freedom. This means your head and body one-to-one control the movements of the character in-game, ultimately making you the character. Add in motion controllers and full locomotion movement, and that fourth wall is gone. You are now in the game. And if you want to go even further, you can even buy yourself haptic feedback vests to add an extra layer to scare the hell out of you. Something is behind you, and it just touched your shoulder. And even if you don't go to that extreme, VR is still the ultimate way to experience a horror game. Yes, sadly many VR games are rife with cheap jump scares, but even those still don't get me. They are more in my face, but it doesn't take away the fact that I was clearly expecting them. Instead, it's the true element of surprise that gets me. For example, I have some recorded. Here are 2 instances of me running into a liquor in Resident Evil 2 in VR. When a jump scare is planned, it's almost too obvious. An item is placed at the end of the room, nothing is around the second you pick it up. Where's the liquor? There he is. Ow. I mean, this just was so obvious. But when it's not planned, and the enemy I left alive earlier to save ammo pops their head again, That's when I jump, because that's on me. The game didn't pre-plan it. As I say in the clip.
Oh God, I forgot about you!
This is me being immersed in the world, and me dealing with a mistake I made. I should have killed that licker earlier, but I figured, it'll be fine. But next time I rush into that room, I paid dearly for it. These are the moments that stick with me. Genuine surprises. A planned jump scare is fleeting, and when you replay the game, you know it's always there. But even in future playthroughs, if you turn a corner and realize you made a mistake, that moment will stay with you long after you shut the game off. So yeah, let's recap. What gets me scared of a game? Ideally, a creepy setting with tons of inhuman creatures with periodic moments of losing my ability to see even 2 feet in front of me. A soundscape that never quits even when it's supposed to be quiet. A low hum to set up tension, and loud droning bangs to really get the blood pumping. And gameplay that doesn't make me feel like a superhero, yet also not a moron. Restrict the player, and every enemy should be a legitimate threat. Of course, by the end of the game, it feels good to feel like a badass. Overcoming all the horrors I did to get there needs to feel earned. So in the beginning, you gotta be a wimp. This is non-negotiable. Oh, and developers, if you're gonna add choices to your story, make them morally difficult. You want the player to think about the game years later, and if they'd make those choices again. And if at any moment I forget that I'm playing a video game, you've got me hooked. But besides all of that, if I were to narrow it down to one single thing in a horror game that really gets me, actually scared, well, it's the freedom to make my own mistakes. I will jump because in that moment, my memory failed me, and I'm screwed for it. So, with all that said and done, let's end this video properly. And let's talk about some games that have scared me personally. Now, yes, horror is subjective. But once again, my tolerance is too damn high. So I can guarantee that these games will at least get under your skin. The Resident Evil series is just chock full of amazing games. But in my eyes, the scariest is possibly Resident Evil 2 Remake. I love the original. Back then, this game was terrifying. But nowadays, I'm just too damn desensitized. The original is legitimately one of the best games ever made, but it ain't scary anymore. So the remake picks up the slack here with its amazing enemy design and its use of dark hallways. Whether you're playing on a monitor or in VR, this game will get you at some point. Silent Hill 2. The original and the remake are still to this day scary, and this is thanks to the sound design. They both share many of the same sound effects and the same soundtrack, but the inclusion of 3D audio in the remake edges out the original, especially when James's light goes out and you're surrounded in the dark. But even if the visuals and soundscape don't scare you, it's the heart-wrenching plot that will make you feel empty inside. Phasmophobia. I've only ever played this in VR. It's a ghost hunting game, a basic premise highlighted with an amazing atmosphere and great mechanics. I love the different settings, and this is a blast to play with friends. Yet, I have played this game alone, and legitimately got terrified. Yes, it has jump scares, but they feel natural since they only trigger if you're actively trying to make the ghost appear. Darkwood. Play this on PlayStation 5. The DualSense just adds so much more to the overall experience. Turn on adaptive triggers and leave the controller speaker on. And by the way, this game prides itself on not having jump scares. Outside of that, I'm not going to say anything else about it. Go in as blind as possible. Eternal Darkness. Debatably the first horror game to feature analog horror concepts. The less I say the better, but one thing for sure is the idea of a sanity meter originated here. Yes, there are jump scares, but these feel earned, and kind of your fault if you let your sanity drain too much. It's a great game with a cool story and lore, but the sanity mechanics is what shines here. And some honorable mentions, some non-horror games that have some of the best horror sections. Half-Life 2 Ravenholm, Half-Life Alyx, the Jeff section, and the Fallout games. They're just rife with creepy areas. I especially love Fallout 4 VR with horror mods. Well, that's the video. And yeah, horror is subjective. Everyone's got different tastes. So, I'd love to hear your recommendations. I mean, games that genuinely terrified you. I have plenty of horror games, a lot of great fun horror games. I got plenty of those. But I'm talking about games that scared the living crap out of you. Ones that kept you up at night. Ones that you cannot recommend to certain people because they might be fraidy cats. Those are the ones I'm interested in. Give me those and, leave them in the comments below so everyone else can, see them. But, yeah. Those are the good horror games in my eyes. The ones that can make you forget that you're playing a horror game and they can legitimately terrify you. So, please, throw them away. But yeah, that's the video. Thanks for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe. And I'll see you guys later.